Welcome to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm bringing you my March reading wrap-up.
Hi, it's me, the person in the video that you're about to watch. I'm just starting editing this, having now filmed it, and I have a weird piece of hair, like, on one of the sides. It's doing a weird thing, and it does a weird thing throughout this video, and I don't know what to do about it, so, sorry, bye.
I had a pretty good reading month in March, despite all of the things that happened. If you would like to, you can watch some of my reading vlogs to hear a bit more about what I thought about these books real time. But in the meantime, I've comprised kind of a line or two about all of them that I'm going to share with you, and we're just going to go through everything I read in March. I ended up reading 21 books in March, 3 more than the 19 that I put on my TBR, the reasons for which I think will be apparent. I also managed to get through my rereads, which hasn't happened in quite a while. So yeah, join me on this beautiful sunny Friday evening when I'm filming this, and I will share with you the books that I read. First up was a quick win. This was The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Chris Riddell. This is absolutely beautiful. If you haven't checked out this book, I really think you should. Get it from your library or buy your own copy if you can. It's a little bit expensive for a picture book, but it would make a wonderful gift, and if you can't give gifts to yourself in this dark time, what can you do? I really recommend this. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, unsurprisingly, but with a bit of a twist. So the main character is a queen who seeks to end the curse on her land by going and finding the sleeper. And I won't go into too much detail because it's not very long. You can read this in a day and then spend another week looking at the beautiful illustrations. Suffice to say, interesting things happen. I'm going to see if I can find the illustration that I loved the most. Look at her on her horse. I thought it was amazingly wonderful. My one qualm is that it should be more gay. But that's my qualm with most books, so, you know, can't complain too much. Next, I read the book that was a hangover from my February TBR. That was Wicked As You Wish by Ringe Pucko. I really didn't enjoy this book. I talked about it in my review, which will either be out, linked below, or somewhere. I think my biggest problem with this book was that it's a bit of a mess, and I think it's intentionally a mess, and I think this is a personal preference thing more than anything else. So if you loved this book, please don't attack me for it. It's multiple different story worlds, but pushed into one. So you have like Alice in Wonderland was a big one, and there's fairy tales, and then there's some other things happening, and it's all mushed together, which could be really interesting, but I really wasn't expecting it to be that. And then reading it, I sort of went, I don't know what's happening, I don't like, and I couldn't get to know any of the characters. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't a good experience. Then I finished the audiobook of City of Brass, which was just phenomenal. It's so good. If you haven't read City of Brass and you aren't sure how to get through it because it's quite big, Kingdom of Copper is also quite big, maybe you don't know what to do, pick up the audiobooks because the audiobook narrator is exceptional. But it's just one of the best kind of epic fantasy worlds out there. It's got a kind of heart-wrenching romance in it, politics, it's got some action sequences, it's got epic journeys and fish out of water narratives, and it's just so good. Keeping going with some digital reading, I read my review copy of Night of the Dragon by Julie Kagawa. This is the third book in the Shadow of the Fox series, trilogy, I believe. It was alright. I've been in a bit of a YA slump for a while. Some books have pulled me out of it, and look at that lovely sunshine. Some books have pulled me out of it, and I've enjoyed them a fair amount. But this really wasn't for me. The first book in the series is definitely the strongest of all of them. It's the most high concept, it's got the most kind of meat to it, and by book 3 I was kind of like, I think that might be because I hadn't read book 1 and 2 recently, so if you read them all kind of 1, 2, 3, you might have a better time than I did. I skipped one. I did read Dark and Deepest Red really early on in the month. This is by Anna Marie McLemore, who is a non-binary author who writes just the most beautiful prose. It's so good. Very, very gay. One of the most lovely gay books. Really gorgeous lyrical writing, which may be a selling point for you. It might be a huge no. They're wonderful. This one involves time jumps, which isn't always my favourite thing, but what I appreciated was that the time jump kind of purpose was not, look, this story is repeating itself in the future, which is one of my pet peeves because I don't want to read a book twice. I really, really recommend this. I think it's really, really good. Back in chronological order now, I read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I did a full review of this, so you can just go and watch that. I did a comparison of it to The Night Circus. I had a good time making that video. I thought this was excellent. This book follows a main character called Zachary, who discovers a kind of hidden world of the Starless Sea and the harbour. It's kind of magical library. It's very much about stories. It's really, really good. As I say, go watch my video review of that because I really recommend it. I was a bit nervous going into this that I wouldn't enjoy it because I love The Night Circus so much. And I say it in my review, but one of the things this does really well is the same atmospheric writing that Erin Morgenstern does really well, so if you liked that about the Night Circus, this is a good shout. Another book, Supernova. Again, I did a reading blog for this, so you can go and check that out if you want to know what my initial thoughts were, but I've since done a bit more pondering on that. This is the third book in Marissa Mayer's Renegades trilogy, which is all about superheroes. It's a YA series, superheroes, anarchy versus government, all of that stuff. It's good stuff. I enjoyed this as an end to a very good trilogy. I think Marissa Mayer does a really good job of turning some things on their head that we've been kind of building up to this entire book. I think that's really cool. I wasn't 100% sold on the ending, but it's been a bit of a running theme for me not being sold on endings of duologies and trilogies of late, so I'm a bit nervous about reading Empire of Gold. We'll see. Anyway, I think if you're looking for a YA superhero trilogy, this is a good way to go. I don't think I've read anything quite so consumable as Marissa Mayer's writing. I think she's really good. Then I read Rune of Stars by Lindsay Miller. This is the sequel to Mask of Shadows and the end to that duology. Again, I think this was in a reading blog, it would have been. I liked this well enough. I'm going to see how I feel about it after reading Mask of Shadows, which is in my March TBR. It has a non-binary protagonist. It has a queer love story as a result. It's got much more queer stuff in it than book one did, which I really appreciated, because one of the pet peeves is when people write a queer character but they completely exist in a vacuum, which doesn't happen in the real world. We'll have more thoughts on this, I expect, in my April wrap-up. My next audiobook of the month, I ended up buying more Audible credits just so I could get to this a bit sooner, and it was like 3 days before my credit came in, so it was an intense moment. I love that in the bookish community, intense is buying audiobook credits. This is the audiobook for Kingdom of Copper. This is the sequel to City of Brass, and it was amazing. I had read this before. I read a digital review copy of it when it first came out, or just before it first came out, and I remembered really enjoying it, but I think I must have been in one of these manic, just get through the books kind of modes, because I didn't remember anything about the ending, which is often what happens when I'm in that zone. Listening to it and slowing it down and having to really absorb it, just so amazing. There were times where I'd be listening to it kind of before going to sleep, and I was sort of like, I need to turn this off now, because otherwise I'm going to be up all night just reading till the end of this book. Next, I read The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in this series, the 100,000 Kingdoms series. Again, in a reading blog somewhere for my initial thoughts, but I really enjoyed this. I was hugely surprised. I thought coming off the back of Kingdom of Copper, nothing was going to do the politics for me like that would, and certainly not immediately afterwards. I thought I was going to get really bogged down in this. It would be meh. But actually, there was much more to it than just kind of politics-y heirs and succession stuff. There was a lot more romance than I was expecting, and I really enjoyed the romance in this. It's a bit of a kind of dark romance, but I say in that vlog, I think what I liked about it is that it doesn't just come from a place of love at first sight. There's desire there, and it's not a case of, well, now we're in love forever. It's much more like, I'd quite like to sleep with you. So yeah, enjoyed that. Thought it was good. I would like to read more books in the series. I'm not going to actively seek them out until my TBR's done. It's not like a I must have them now situation. Then I read Tunnel of Bones. I think I said everything I need to say about this in the vlog where I read this. I think this is a good middle grade book in my experience of middle grade, which is fairly limited, but it does a lot of telling you information about France that I just don't need because I've been to France and I know about France. I think that's something that middle grade audiences might not have, so they would find it interesting to hear about how you pronounce the word crepe, but not necessarily for me. I think City of Ghosts was much stronger, and I think that later books where it gets into kind of the metaphysic-y stuff that it's hinting at the end of this is going to be interesting. I think I might have to library them rather than buy them from now on. But I did enjoy reading this, it was good fun. Cassidy is an interesting main character. There's some good stuff happening, just the setting wasn't for me this time. Next I read Weve the Lightning by Coriel Lee. This is out on the 7th of April, so it should be out really soon, and I really enjoyed this. I wasn't expecting to. One of the things that was interesting about this is that it's a hard magic setting, so some people have storm powers, and I'm going to forget all of the words because they were all in either Russian or a fantasy language, and I don't know which, and it's terrible that I don't, but I don't speak any Russian, and I'm unlikely to be welcome in Russia, so it's probably fine. So people have these storm powers, and there's a very set way that you use them, and some people have training in how to use them, and some people are not given that training because they're part of a rebellion. I just wanted to be told how it worked, and the book kind of expected you to learn it through osmosis, and I just didn't. So that was my biggest critique of the book, was that there was ample time to just explain how it was happening right early on, and they just didn't. And I think had they put that in, it would have been much easier to immerse yourself in that world without thinking like, wait, hang on, why is that not working? Why is she so upset about this? The rest of the book was very, very good. It's got a romance that edges a little bit close to a love triangle, so if you're wary of that, keep that in mind. It's action-packed, stealing from the government, a revolution, and there's loads of other stuff happening in this book. It grabbed me. I read it in a day, I think, and I just had a really good time with it. What did we get to? Next I read The Girl in the Stars by Mark Lawrence. This is the first book in the Book of the Ice trilogy, one assumes, which is set in the same world as his Book of the Ancestor trilogy as well. While it's set in the same world, it takes a completely different kind of culture. It takes the people of the ice, if you're familiar with the books. It's interesting. I was very concerned at the beginning because the concept was all the children who don't fit in with our society will be put down a hole to die. And I was like, oh no, is this going to be a disabled people go down a hole? That's terrible. And it is that a little bit. It feels much more kind of Spartan, so it feels much more historical than it does modern, even though the books are kind of sci-fi-esque. It wasn't terrible. Again, I'm not the best person to speak to that. It was much more about the different magics people have rather than their own physical ability, and it explained it in a way that didn't feel awful. But what it didn't do was answer any questions about the world. I think I have more questions than I had before. So if you're wondering if you should read the other books before you read this series, you could go into it completely blind. You'll be fine. Eventually read both, because it would be worth doing, and you'll get the nuggets of information from both. Then, continuing our theme of stars, I read The Sword in the Stars by Corey McCarthy and Amy Rose Capetta. This is the sequel to Once and Future, the ending of that duology. I like this well enough. It's fine. I'm not crazy about the execution. I really love the concept. It's incredibly frustrating to love a concept so much and just it not have pulled off in the right way. It feels really clunky. The writing isn't the best. When I wrote my review for it, I realised that part of the problem was that there was so much to cram into quite a short book. It's not long. It felt much more like it was kind of 5 stories pushed into one, and you're dealing with all these different identities, so give each of those characters their own book. I don't know why it was a duology and not a trilogy. It felt like there was enough material there to fill another book, so things just got smushed over and schlepped around, and I don't know. While I love the concept and I admire the authors for trying to write this all-encompassing, really queer narrative, I don't think that the actual story was great. Then I read Hero of Ages, or then I finished. I kind of read this throughout a few weeks because there's no way I could have finished this in one go. This is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in the Mistborn trilogy. I really enjoyed this. I loved this for being a hard magic system that explains itself. I definitely think book 2 is my favourite of this trilogy, The Well of Ascension. I just really, really enjoyed it. I was really worried that the main character Vin was going to get a really cruddy ending, and I don't want to spoil it, so I won't. But it wasn't amazing and wasn't terrible. That's all I'll say. And last of my non-rereads, I read Goldilocks by Laura Lamb. This is feminist science fiction. At the beginning, all these ladies steal a spaceship because they basically were meant to be going on the trip, and at the last minute, NASA or whoever were like, no, we're going to send some men. It's a great start to a book. Got less fond of it towards the end, middle and end. A lot of the plot gets taken over by one particular plot element that isn't my jam, personally. You'll have to read it to find out. I do think it's some great science fiction. It poses a lot of questions. It does go into a bit of virus-y territory if you're avoiding that at the moment. But I do think it's worth reading, and I'd read another book by Laura Lamb now. I don't think I'd read Goldilocks again, but I would seek out her other stuff probably. And then last things I read through the month were my rereads. I read the illustrated edition, I just don't want to get it down, of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Enjoyed that. Uncomfortable reading some elements now. It's not aging hugely well. There's a lot of kind of phobia around Dudley at the beginning, and yeah, just not amazing, but the nostalgia of it was really fun. And this book obviously has all of the like, let us show you how the wizarding world works, and I enjoyed that. I have Order of the Phoenix on my TBR for next month. Yes, I'm reading them out of order, it doesn't matter. Then I finished Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. This is an amazing book in the Discworld series. If you're looking to start, I really recommend this one. I just think it's phenomenal. Then I finished Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. This is kind of quintessential YA from about 2 years ago. Didn't like this as much as the first time I read it. I think I hadn't read that much YA the first time I read this. It would have been quite powerful 2 years ago, but we've had so many great female protagonists since then that actually Alosha, the main character in this, kind of comes off a bit meh. It's also incredibly quick. It's much thinner than I thought it was. It just doesn't give any breathing room. It just goes straight in and you're like, oh well, now clearly you're in love, and that made no sense. Then I finished Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. I talked about this in my October wrap-up when I read it. I think this is really, really good if you like non-fiction. Maybe if you're avoiding topics of death at the moment, perhaps not the best option, although she does talk about embracing the idea of death, and I think it's a really powerful mind shift, and I do recommend her other book, From Here to Eternity, if you haven't read that. And to close off the month, I finished Now I Rise by Kirsten White. This is the second book in the Conqueror's Saga series. I reread this, I think in October of last year, something like that, end of last year, so fairly recently. I'm pretty sure I talked about it in a video then. If not, let's suffice to say that it's really, really good. I think the Radu's plotline, her brother, is really wonderful in this book, and I need to reread the third one. I think that's 21 books. I ended March having read 58 books in the year, which is really strong. I'd much prefer it to be 60 because I just like round numbers, but never mind, we'll be at 60 tomorrow when I'm filming this, so that's fine. And I'm willing to excuse myself. It's a time of crisis. I can go a bit easy. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are interested in any of the books I talked about, links to them will all be in the description below. They are affiliate links. I make a tiny bit of money if you shop using them. You do not have to. Also linked below are the links to all of my socials. Twitter is the best place to find me if you want to chat. Do comment below if you read any of these books this month. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if any of them are on your TBR, if you want me to let you know if there's anything in them that you want to avoid or you particularly enjoy. I'm going to stop waving my arms like I'm ridiculous, and I'm gonna go. That's all from me. I will see you in the next one. What did we get to?